Hello everybody, welcome back to another Dead by Daylight related video today. In today's video, we're going to be we're actually going to be watching a Scott June video. Now everybody knows Scott June, he's one of the most successful DVD creators in this space, one of the most well-known and respected people. He's probably a lot smarter than I am, and he knows a lot more about this game than I do because I take a lot of continuous breaks. But today he's made a video about, basically the title of the video says, the Go Next Epidemic has to stop. And I watched this video before, so I did pre-watch it, but I wanted to go ahead and re-watch it and share some of the more interesting parts of the video and give my feedback and response, because I have a handful of ideas that I have in the comments. I'll flash up on the screen right now if people want to kind of get the gist of what I'm going to be talking about in this video as a response to some of the points that he makes about this epidemic / issue in the game. So without further ado, let's get right into it. We're going to provide some good feedback, and if you guys also want to leave your own feedback and comments down in the comment section down below, please let me know. I am not going to be probably the most informed, well-educated person to give the best high-level opinions of all time. However, I definitely like having discussions with people, and this is something that I think is going to be very interesting. So again, leave in the comment section down below what you guys are also thinking as well, and any ideas you might have. So let's get right into it.
I don't even know why some people launch DBD anymore. I don't understand. They just launch the game to just disconnect. They don't even play the game anymore. Every single thing they encounter is just something that's considered unfun or miserable, and so they'll just kill themselves on hook because that's not the exact thing they wanted to go against. The problem is that's basically everything in the game for them now.
So we're going to give it a pause right there. As I'm editing this video, I'm not going to be like sharing the entire video. Obviously, I want to be transformative with Scott's original video, but we're going to talk about the points that he makes. This first point about how a lot of his experiences tends to be people essentially disconnecting over almost anything that they see in the game nowadays. There's no like unified, agreed upon thing that people tend to like anymore. People just want to disconnect and blame everything. They don't seem to care for any part of the game. That's pretty much true. Like, even in my experience, I don't experience this Go Next issue as much as I'm sure Scott June does, but it is something that even for somebody like me, I experienced quite a bit. Probably 1 out of like 5 matches of mine, I got like people disconnecting just because they're not happy with the thing that they're playing against. And the only reason why we decided with Scott June here to also agree with this take as well is because if you go into Twitter, now I know Twitter is not representative of all of DBD forum and discussion, but if you were to go on Twitter or Reddit or other social medias where people talk about this game, and this game has had a universally controversial community where people are always at each other's throats. You can't go on any of these forums anymore, Steam, Reddit, or Twitter, without people complaining about almost every single thing that's within the game. I can't find people anymore who actually go on Twitter to celebrate something that's universally fun or exciting about Dead by Daylight. It's gotten so bad, in fact, that like even when people finally, you can probably come up with examples of things that came into the game that people initially found to be really exciting and also fun. After some time, they almost always get hated once again. Like, he is correct about this issue where it is an issue for all skills of players. Even for me, I occasionally run into this issue pretty consistently. And he is correct that it's almost gotten to the point now where like just about everything is almost not enjoyable. And it does make you wonder why people play the game anymore.
Basically, when we had the original chess merchant, I still in those scenarios like advocated, killing yourself on hook, and that might have been the sole exception where I still would consider it acceptable today, but there's just nothing like that in the game anymore.
I'm actually going to disagree with that take. I think Skull Merchant is nerfed down to the ground to the point where even if she's not necessarily the most fun to play against, she's not like super frustrating to play against. She pretty much will lose a good portion of matches if people just try to learn against how to play her current kit. It's not that strong, but so I would retract that and say, whereas before, maybe sure you could have disconnected and people would have made sense out of it. I don't think now. I think guys just come on. It might be a little bit boring, but just kick the shit out of this Skull Merchant and move on to your next match.
There are some unpleasant situations, don't get me wrong. There are very, very boring games where you'll have like a super sweaty knockout singularity slugging everyone and you gotta bleed out for 4 minutes. Those games are miserable. But it's also 4 minutes. It's not the end of the world. It's not a huge deal that's going to ruin your entire day there. So there are unfun scenarios in the game, but I think we need to accept that there will always be some unfun scenarios in the game. You can never fully remove them. It's just straight up impossible. Stop pretending like that's ever going to happen. Let's actually address the world as it is, which is the reality of, some things are not going to be fun.
I would agree with this as well, but this is also a persistent issue that happens across all different kinds of communities, which I'm sure Scott's aware of. I mean, even a new game like Marvel Rivals, like I wasn't even there for the hype. I basically just recently installed it, put a couple matches, and people also, when they're losing, if they get where they get stomped pretty quickly, they tend to disconnect very, very early. There's just people that are prematurely always disconnecting in a lot of different online multiplayer games. But yes, the EBD, I would say, probably arguably has one of the more unique positions in this case, because you don't even get like halfway through a match, or sometimes even through a third of the match before people are disconnecting. That is a persistent problem.
One, you just simply remove the ability to just try to Kobe off hook. You just make it so you can't do that. The problem is you have to think about what people will do to circumvent that. If that's the case, people will get rescued and just do nothing. They'll just stand there and refuse to play the game. And for that to work, we would need it to be punishable to go AFK or do nothing and not play the game. The problem is it's really hard to prove that, because someone could hide from the team. Unless you have bond and you can specifically see them doing this, it's genuinely difficult to prove that. Not only that, there's another layer there where you have to actually review it manually if you're going to punish someone for doing that. And that can be really, like, they don't have the resources to do that. And that, I think, is the main problem here. It is a good solution to remove the ability to Kobe on hook, but at the same time, since people will just stand in a corner and stop playing, then you need to address how are we going to punish people for refusing to play the game, because that's the core problem.
This is one of those things where I don't really understand how this is that complicated to solve, because I think if you were to combine removing the Kobe mechanic so people can't kill themselves, but also like set like a for example, we'll just make, if you could just make a blanket like rule of the game where after like, let's just say 4 or 5 minutes of just standing still in the game, that people will get kicked of the game and or banned with like a timeout, like a queue timeout. I think that's something that actually would work, because when you really think about it, Dead by Daylight is not really a game where anybody has any particular reason to be standing still without moving a single muscle, pressing a single key for 3, 4, 5 minutes at a time. Like sometimes you might be like kind of hiding in an area, you're not going to be moving too much, but I think it's not that impossible to program a situation where if you literally stand still and you do not move around, like somebody who is AFK would, like they just completely got up and walked away, that you would get basically kicked from the game and or given like a little, queue penalty, because that doesn't really happen ever in DBD where people are going completely still, not touching their keyboard. If that does happen because people want to go ahead and stand in the corner, I think it's something that could be implemented in the game, because that way, hey, I mean, like if you're a killer and you're playing against a survivor that goes completely AFK and they're not moving a muscle, then you can just ignore them, and if they wait the 3, 4, 5 minute timer, then they would get punished for it, because the mechanic would implement, and then they would get like they're kicked, and then they would be replaced by a bot, and then they would also get like a temp ban. Or if the survivor did not want to get that penalty, then they would actually have to click a key, move a muscle, and then in that case they are forced to stay in the match. So you can't, I think in that way, in that regard, you will help incentivize people from wanting to do the go next strategy, because if you don't let them kill themselves on hook, and you also make it where they can't go completely AFK without also getting penalized for it, then they're forced to move with the game, which is, if they're going to be forced to move with the game, then they might as well play the match. I'm not saying you're going to completely remove all circumstances where people go AFK, because it's going to happen, but like you could at least punish people more on average, because anybody these days who knew that, like killers these days will usually leave a survivor alone sometimes, and at that point you can get them punished. You know what I'm saying? So like either they AFK, don't move a muscle, in which they would be penalized for it if you have a program system for 3, 4, 5 minutes, or they're forced to basically move a muscle, in which in that case, if they can't get out of the game because they can't Kobe, and then they can't just AFK until they get killed or something, then they essentially have to basically play the match. So and that way, I don't see why this is something he thinks is entirely impossible to program. I think it is. Is it going to be kind of simplistic? Yeah, well, you have to kind of give a time cushion so that you don't accidentally ban people who probably don't deserve it, who are just kind of like standing still for like a minute or two or something. That makes sense. But in Dead by Daylight, after like 4 minutes, you probably have no excuse to be standing completely still, not moving a single inch. So I think it's like a pretty reasonable thing you should be able to implement, and it probably should impact next to no person like ever.
1,000 moderators to review these games that are being reported, of which there's not even any replay system. How are you supposed to do that? Maybe you could see that someone's not moving for a while, the rate at which they get crows or something like that. Maybe there are ways to automate it without a replay system. But
again, I don't think you really need a replay system. It would be nice, because a lot of other games do it at this scale, and behavior has no excuse when this game is so massive to be able to implement a replay system. Like I said, like a simple program where people are punished for going completely AFK or completely still not moving at all for like 3, 4, 5 minutes. That should probably be something that will end up being okay. I don't think it's going to accidentally punish a lot of people, because there's really no excuse to be standing still in DBD for that long a period of time. And then in that way, most of the bans are probably going to be justified, or unless people can prove that otherwise. And again, removing the Kobe ability will help people prevent themselves from killing themselves, which is another way to keep them into the game and force them to play. And it's all about, when it comes to this conversation, it's important to remember that we are talking about ways to, I want to reframe the conversation to decentivize people from actually disconnecting or having to go next strategy. We're not talking about completely eliminating it, because like we discussed earlier, that Scott also said, which he's completely correct about, is we're never going to completely remove that. People who don't want to play a game will just not play a game. But it's about trying to catch those middle ground of people who would play if they were given a reason to, and make them play.
You see the problem here. There are too many intricacies to automate that type of process. So what's the other option there?
I don't think it has to be that way.
Players do this, and if players mass report people doing that over time, you would have to think statistically, what are the odds that this many people are just having a vendetta against this particular person and reporting them? Maybe there's some truth to it there, but then you get the issue of like streamers and content creators getting mass reported. Even if you're in a non-mode, they could be stream sniping, and then you'll have content creators randomly getting timed out and banned. I
would agree with this. Like he's saying, it's probably not a good idea for players to have the control of that. But again, I'm just going to reiterate, I don't think the solution is as complicated. But by the way, we're talking about like how to decentivize people from wanting to go next. One of the more interesting parts of this video is later when Scott talks about how to incentivize people to keep playing, like with rewards and stuff. And that's something I think paired with removing the Kobe feature and adding like a blanket like kick/temp ban feature, if you're like completely AFK for like 4 minutes, not moving a single muscle. I think there's a combined number of mechanics or programs that could help fix this issue mostly. Not going to fix all of it, but mostly.
How do you fix someone refusing to play the game? I don't think you can. I think what you can do is reward people for playing the game, and I think that's probably the only actual way to do it.
I completely agree with this. Like I said, you can't completely remove the issue, but you can try to reward people for doing it and try to incentivize people kind of like in the middle ground who can be swayed to continue playing as long as you give them the right incentives. Though there's always going to be those outliers of people who, if they don't want to play in any way, shape, or form, they're just not going to, regardless of what you throw at them. But the only thing you can do is try to alleviate the problem or make it a lot less common by giving people a reason to continue playing.
And you would probably want to make use of the prop system. Like, under the prop system, you could reinvent the entire system and how it works. You could actually make it so there are multiple categories of props, and one of the categories could be stuck it out till the end or something like that. Or, you know, the props of endurance, or you could say the medal of man, even go XDD, you know, actual DVD reference. There are a number of things you can do for a commendation on a player for sticking it out in a scenario where it's still pretty much a guaranteed loss. And I think over time you could reward those people rather than punishing everybody else, because it's just simply too hard to punish. As soon as you get one person improperly banned for no good reason due to this automated system, the system is considered a failure. It's like the whole thing, if you put an innocent man in jail, it's better to, like, you know, the whole phrase there.
So that's why, again, like with my idea, but like, it sounds very simplistic and almost kind of stupid. But again, if you were to probably implement something like a blanket, like, hey, if you're AFK for like 4 or 5 minutes, that standing still without moving once, like not even touching a single key or moving your mouse or something, if you're completely AFK, then like, that's one of those things where I would say, hey, like, I don't know if something like that would actually catch any one person and ban them accidentally. If that happened, I would almost argue that people who are trying on purpose, because, again, if you're on the game you're playing, even if you're not wanting to play, there's no excuse for any person to ever be AFK, not touching the keyboard or mouse or anything at all for that long of a period of time. But also, like I did say before, actually I really like his opinion on this, is the prop system. Like, one of the most dated things in Dead by Daylight right now is the post-game prop system, because you are able to give props to players, but it means absolutely nothing. It doesn't do anything for the player at all. And then when it comes to like reporting players, up until more recently, in recent years, that system was almost meant completely nothing too. And even if you report somebody, how frequently like the developers are able to take action on that is also very like inconsistent as well. So I do think utilizing the prop system to give people rewards, and I would argue shards are probably the best rewards because blood points is not much of an incentive these days, and people don't really care that much about XP. So maybe like XP and shards would probably be the best way to incentivize people to keep playing if you were to give them props and they get like small rewards for that. I like that idea.
I don't know what to do now to stop people from DCing. People still DC or kill themselves on Hook versus Nemesis with no perks too, because it's just Nemesis. They don't like Nemesis. It's just, I don't know what to do anymore. I actually don't know what to do. I've listed my possible solutions here. I'm curious if you guys have any. We could all use the suggestions at this point because it's just getting ridiculous and it is truly draining the fun out of the game. I just don't want to play killer anymore. In fact, all I want to do is 4-man survivor threats. It's the only way I can still have fun right now.
I think this is one of the most sad things to hear about people who play Double Dailies. A lot of people end up fading away because they don't find the game any fun anymore. I know I have my periods of time where I have to take breaks from DBD because it does get pretty stale at times. And after listening to Sky here, number one, I could completely agree. It is so boring if you were to play a match and people are just not playing the way that they're supposed to. And that's also one of the issues with a lot of metas is like organic metas tend to be people taking the game, and although the developers might intend for the game to play a certain way, they tend to just find mechanics and find different perks or strategies to play the game that isn't necessarily intended, and sometimes these metas can be pretty unfun, and then that's another thing that burns people out as well. So although this isn't necessarily a meta conversation, this is just people disconnecting and going next. This is one of those epidemics of the game where I could say confidently that this is absolutely boring, and I feel it kind of sucks when you see people who always like advocate for Dead by Daylight, not always defending DBD because DBD does deserve criticism, but advocating for the game and trying to keep playing it. It's really upsetting to see people like that end up getting burnt out as well. Like, because you can see here, like, you know, you can see somebody who wants to actually play the game and have fun with it, but they can't because when they try to, they're put in these like most boring matches because players can't just play the way that they're supposed to. And by supposed to here, I just mean like try to play the match, not disconnect right away. So I do understand how frustrating it is because it's kind of like not being able to play the actual games, kind of being forced to just always have bad matches. But that being said, I want to scroll ahead down here and basically just read my comments and talk about some of my ideas really quick. So the first ideas I kind of wrote as a comment in response to the video. Well, actually, we're going to go to the second and third. I already mentioned here about removing the Kobe mechanic because I would argue, like I said in the comment, that it's a minor function of the game. People don't really benefit that much from it. You can tweak a couple perks who rely on the mechanic, and if you remove the ability for players to kill themselves, it usually incentivizes people to keep playing because there are people out there who only kill themselves because they know that they can, and I'm sure that if they can't kill themselves, that group of people will continue to play as long as they know that they can't actually kill themselves. That's something that's like pretty important to understand. It's like there's on a spectrum, different people can be incentivized to keep playing depending on what you throw at them. Sometimes just removing the ability to kill themselves will be all they need to keep playing. And number three, I talked about introducing a baseline penalty for players who AFK in position for like 5+ minutes. I said that in my 3,500 hours of playing the game, there's never been a reason a player goes completely AFK for many minutes at a time without moving a centimeter. If behavior introduces mechanic, it can allow killers who notice AFK survivors to let them be, resulting in the temp ban if the player chooses to stay that way. Then they'll be forced to either resume playing to avoid a temp ban or just take the ban. Behavior could then introduce a survivor forfeit system so the killers who try to abuse the mechanic with slugging can't unfairly punish survivors who are left on the ground, slugged, or unable to do objectives. I think that might be able to help as well. And then my first idea, I basically said, this is where the more interesting part of the video is that the behavior just has to reintroduce more progression-based systems in the game. And I listed the ranking system or reward system for completed games. I like Scott's idea of rewarding people for giving props at the end of the match. We all could talk about for days about how whether or not we think that the MMR system has helped or hurt the game. One thing that the MMR system completely does is remove other incentives to do other activities in the game because the win conditions don't really support that. So the old emblem system is a good example of a system that changed the way that we used to rank up when it was about pips, but that system rewards you with better emblems and better progress if you were able to do different things in the match. So I think that if the win conditions of the game were changed, so where winning wasn't just about killing survivors or surviving, and they were to utilize the emblem system to try to make it where people are more incentivized to do other activities to still benefit from it, the people won't disconnect as much because, yeah, they might go against a map that isn't going very well for them, but as long as they play and they interact with their objectives and different activities, that they will still be just fine and get rewarded for it. So a better ranking system for people to see themselves on leaderboards and people to continue ranking up, like at least the PIP system allows you to see where you were progressing as well. So people want to actually complete games so that they weren't disconnecting and losing their rank progress. I think that will help incentivize people to keep playing. Again, I think that like the rewards and everything else will keep letting them wanting them to keep playing. And then I even said like a reward system for completing games, even if it's just like 5 or 10 shards. You know, if that was a reward every time somebody stopped playing, like completed an entire game of DBD without disconnecting, besides just the blood points that they earn in the game, there should be an incentive, an extra bonus for people who at least finish a match. I said in the comment, I said, the problem with current DBD is that people's primary progression in the match is usually just blood points, and after so much DBD, nobody really cares about that anymore. If you give players more reasons to keep playing throughout the match, they'll feel more obligated to do that to minimize the blowback of a bad game, or to at least get the rewards that feel better than blood points. Again, people usually will continue to play, if not at least to avoid a punishment or getting blowback. Like again, with the old ranking system, it used to be de-pipping. If you made it where people can measure their progress with pips or a better ranking system where they get to basically dictate if they continue up the ranking ladder and they can see that visibly on screen. If you reward people with blood points or shards for actually completing matches, if you were to just allow people to give proper props that also reward players with extra shards or something, if they performed well enough for their teammates to give them a props, that all these things will incentivize people to finish matches. And if you remove, like I said, the ability for people to kill themselves off of hook, then you're also going to incentivize people to keep playing. And I think that really nobody should ever be caught straight on accident if they're AFK for 4 or 5 plus minutes in the match, not moving a single muscle. If they do that, they should be able to take a temp ban. There's no situation in the game that would ever require you to do that. So again, all of these things were instituted. I think overall the game will be a lot better and a lot more healthier. Right now we have an epidemic of this because people don't get punished enough for doing the go next strategy. People can do that pretty much scot-free. So you have to, no pun intended by the way for Scott Jones, but you have to basically punish and reward people. You gotta keep incentivizing. It's all about incentives. You will never, ever, ever completely stop anybody who wants to disconnect from disconnecting if they're going to do that, but you can at least mitigate the amount of people that choose to do that by giving them proper incentives. But that being said, this was a great video. Definitely check out Scott Jr.'s channel down in the description below, or by looking up his channel name. It's a great content creator. And with that being said, I'll see you guys all next time. Peace out.